St. Helena's convent stood alone on a windswept hill overlooking the town of Blackwood, Vermont, like a stone guardian watching over something it refused to reveal. Built in 1878 from dark grey granite, the church had towering Gothic arches, razor-thin spires, and windows filled with faded stained glass that glowed dull red and blue at sunset. By 1922, the structure already looked far older than it was: cracked walls, warped doors, and ivy creeping up its sides like grasping fingers. Locals whispered that the church wasn't just old, it was alive, breathing with the wind, shifting with the night, and remembering things the town tried desperately to forget. Inside, the air was always colder than outside, even in summer. Wooden pews lined the chapel like silent witnesses, worn smooth by decades of prayer. The altar sat beneath a massive crucifix, its shadow stretching unnaturally long across the floor whenever candles were lit. Many parishioners claimed that if you stared at that shadow too long, it seemed to move on its own. No one could explain why, but people avoided sitting in the first 3 rows, convinced that something unseen knelt there in eternal silence. 6 nuns lived within the convent walls: Sisters Margaret, Ruth, Eleanor, Agnes, Clara, and Beatrice. To the outside world, they were gentle, devoted, and almost ghost-like in their calm. They spoke little, moved slowly, and followed a rigid daily routine: dawn prayers, silent meals, evening hymns, and midnight vigils. Yet townsfolk noticed something strange about them. They never smiled, never looked directly at anyone, and never left the church grounds. It was as if they belonged more to the building than to the world beyond its gates. At night, St. Helena's transformed into something far more unsettling. When fog rolled down the hill, the church seemed to vanish and reappear like a phantom drifting between worlds. Windows flickered with candlelight, though no one knew who lit them. Occasionally, residents claimed they heard low chanting drifting across the valley, not the soft hymns of Christian worship, but something deeper, older, and unnervingly rhythmic. Dogs in the town howled in response, and even the bravest men avoided walking near the convent after dusk. By autumn of 1922, Blackwood had grown increasingly uneasy. Children refused to play near the hill, farmers crossed themselves when passing the church, and even the town priest felt a creeping dread he couldn't explain. The bell tower loomed above everything, cracked and weathered, its bronze bell silent for years after its mechanism supposedly broke. Yet many swore that on certain nights, the bell trembled as if waiting for a moment no one fully understood, but everyone instinctively feared. The night of October 14th, 1922 began like many others in Blackwood: heavy, still, and strangely suffocating. The sky hung low over the town like a dark blanket, stars barely visible through drifting clouds. A cold wind slid through empty streets, rattling loose shutters and bending the tall pine trees that surrounded St. Helena's convent. Most families had gone to bed early, uneasy after weeks of rumors that the church hill didn't feel right anymore. Inside their homes, people prayed softly before sleeping, as if something invisible might be listening just beyond their walls. At exactly 12:03 a.m., the silence shattered. The massive bronze bell of St. Helena's rang out, slow, deep, and thunderous, rolling across the valley like a warning from another world. Windows flew open all over Blackwood as terrified residents rushed outside in nightclothes. What made it even more terrifying was that everyone knew the bell had been broken for nearly a decade. The ropes were rotted, the gears rusted, and the bell tower itself was unstable. Yet there it was, ringing clearly, deliberately, and with chilling purpose. Some witnesses later claimed the sound was not mechanical, but almost human, as if the bell were crying, groaning, or calling out in pain. Others said each toll felt like a heartbeat echoing inside their chests. In the darkness, several townspeople swore they saw faint, wavering candlelight moving behind the tall convent windows, drifting from room to room in an impossible pattern. No one dared climb the hill to investigate. Instead, they stood frozen in the street, staring upward at the glowing church on the ridge. As the bells continued, something even more disturbing drifted through the cold air, chanting. It wasn't a hymn. It wasn't Latin. It wasn't anything recognizable. The sound was low, layered, and deeply rhythmic, like multiple voices speaking as one. Some listeners felt dizzy, others felt tears well up without knowing why, and a few later admitted they felt an overwhelming urge to walk toward the church, as if being pulled by an unseen force. Dogs barked wildly, horses neighed in panic, and even the churchyard trees seemed to sway unnaturally despite the still air. Minutes passed that felt like hours. The bell tolled exactly 6 times, no more, no less, then fell into a sudden, dreadful silence. The chanting faded with it, leaving behind a heavy stillness that felt worse than the noise itself. Blackwood remained frozen in place, lights flickering in houses, doors creaking in the wind, and every eye fixed on St. Helena's convent looming above them in the dark, illuminated only by ghostly candlelight drifting behind its cracked stained glass windows. Dawn came to Blackwood in a pale, sickly grey, as if even the morning light hesitated to touch St. Helena's convent. Father Caleb barely slept that night. The echo of the midnight bells still rang in his ears like a wound that refused to close. When he finally walked up the hill at first light, the church loomed above him in complete silence, too still, too empty, too watchful. The front doors stood slightly ajar, creaking gently in the cold breeze, as though someone had just stepped out and would return any second. The priest crossed himself, feeling an unease he had never felt in all his years of service. Inside the chapel, the air was suffocatingly heavy, thick with melted candle wax and burnt incense. Hundreds of candles still flickered along the altar, their wax pooling onto the stone floor like frozen tears. The massive crucifix cast a long, trembling shadow that stretched unnaturally across the pews. Father Caleb called out the sisters' names: Margaret, Ruth, Eleanor, Agnes, Clara, Beatrice. But his voice dissolved into the hollow space without reply. Every step he took echoed too loudly, as if the building itself was listening. Moving deeper into the convent, he found the dining hall arranged perfectly for morning prayer. 6 plates sat neatly around the table, spoons aligned with military precision, cups still warm with untouched tea. But there was something deeply wrong. An extra chair had been placed at the head of the table, set for a 7th presence that did not belong there. A single, tall candle burned beside it, dripping thick black wax onto the floor. Father Caleb felt a chill crawl up his spine, as if someone unseen was sitting in that empty chair, watching him. When he reached the sleeping quarters, the dread only intensified. Each nun's bed was made with flawless neatness, blankets tucked in tightly, pillows arranged like they had never been slept on. On every bedside table lay an open Bible, turned to the exact same page, Psalm 23. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Not a single room showed signs of struggle, chaos, or haste. It was as though the 6 women had simply stepped out of existence without disturbing anything around them. Yet one detail made Father Caleb's blood run cold. A thick trail of melted black wax snaked across the hallway floor, beginning near the chapel and leading straight toward a heavy iron door at the end of the corridor, the sealed entrance to the convent's long-forgotten basement. The wax was still slightly warm, as if something had passed only moments before. The priest stood frozen before that door, hearing faint, almost imagined sounds drifting from beneath the stone, like distant footsteps, soft breathing, or perhaps something else entirely. For years, the basement beneath St. Helena's convent had been treated like a wound the town refused to look at. Older residents of Blackwood spoke of it only in whispers, passing stories down like forbidden folklore. They claimed that after a mysterious fire in 1889, the church sealed the lower levels forever, boarding up stairways and erasing them from official records. No blueprints mentioned it, no parish documents acknowledged it, and even Father Caleb had only heard fragmented rumors. Yet everyone knew, deep beneath the chapel, something still existed, buried and forgotten but very much alive in memory. When authorities finally arrived that morning, they hesitated before the heavy iron basement door at the end of the corridor. It was massive, rusted, and engraved with faint symbols that looked nothing like Christian imagery. Cold air seeped from the cracks around it, carrying a metallic smell mixed with burnt incense and decay. The lead investigator, Sheriff Warren, admitted later that he felt as though the door was staring back at him, daring him to open it. 2 deputies had to steady themselves before forcing it open with a crowbar. The moment the door groaned open, a blast of icy air rushed upward, extinguishing nearby candles in an instant. Dust poured out like smoke, swirling in the narrow hallway. Behind it, a steep stone staircase spiraled downward into complete darkness, its steps slick with moisture and centuries of neglect. The walls were carved from rough rock, uneven and jagged, as though the basement had not been built, but dug. The men shined lanterns downward, but the light seemed to die before reaching the bottom. As they descended, the walls revealed disturbing markings etched into the stone. These were not crosses, angels, or holy verses. Instead, they were ancient spirals, distorted faces, and symbols that resembled circles within circles, patterns that historians later compared to pre-Christian pagan rituals. Some carvings appeared fresh, scratched deeply into the rock as if done with bare hands. The deeper they went, the colder it became, and several officers reported hearing faint murmurs echoing from unseen chambers. At the base of the stairs, they discovered a vast underground chamber with a ceiling so high their lantern beams could not reach it. The floor was layered with dust, melted wax, and dark stains that looked suspiciously like old burn marks. Broken wooden crates, shattered glass jars, and remnants of rusted metal tools lay scattered around. But despite a thorough search, there was no sign of the 6 nuns, no bodies, no clothing, no personal belongings, only an unsettling silence that felt heavier than the stone surrounding them. After the disappearance of the 6 nuns, St. Helena's convent was sealed shut, its doors nailed with thick wooden planks and marked with a warning sign that read, "Do not enter, holy ground disturbed." But instead of fading into history, the church seemed to grow darker with time. Rain stained its stone walls black, ivy crawled up like veins, and entire sections of the roof slowly caved in. From a distance, the building no longer looked like a place of worship. It resembled a grave rising from the earth. Blackwood's residents avoided even glancing at the hill, afraid that the church might somehow see them back. Through the 1930s and 40s, strange stories began circulating. Farmers working late in nearby fields swore they heard soft hymns drifting from the abandoned convent at night, despite the fact that no one had entered the building in decades. Some claimed the bell tower, already cracked and unstable, would tremble as if something inside was trying to awaken it. Children who wandered too close reported feeling icy breath on their necks, even on warm summer evenings. The church became a forbidden legend, whispered about in kitchens and taverns but never openly discussed. In 1956, a violent storm ripped through Blackwood, and lightning struck St. Helena's bell tower. The structure collapsed in a thunderous crash, sending shattered stone tumbling down the hill. Townsfolk assumed this would finally silence whatever haunted the place. Yet that same night, multiple witnesses reported hearing the bell ring again, deep, slow, and hollow, even though the bell lay broken in the rubble. Some swore they saw 6 faint silhouettes standing in the chapel windows, kneeling in prayer before vanishing when lightning flashed across the sky. By the late 20th century, thrill-seeking teenagers began sneaking into the ruins despite every warning. Those who entered rarely stayed long. Many claimed they felt unseen hands brush their hair, tug at their sleeves, or push them toward the basement stairs. Others heard footsteps pacing behind them in empty hallways, only to turn and find nothing. A few said they saw 6 shadowy figures praying in the broken chapel, women in old-fashioned nun habits, their faces hidden in darkness, disappearing the moment moonlight touched them. As years turned into decades, St. Helena's became more than a haunted site. It became a wound in Blackwood's memory. Locals avoided building near it, refused to sell land close to it, and some even moved away entirely. The church stood frozen in time, slowly crumbling but never quiet, as if waiting for something or someone to return. At certain hours, especially around midnight, the air around the hill grew unnaturally cold, and a heavy stillness settled over the town like a silent, watchful presence. In the summer of 2025, St. Helena's convent was no longer just a local legend. It had become a subject of national fascination. Drone footage of the crumbling ruins had gone viral, drawing historians, paranormal investigators, and archaeologists to Blackwood. Among them was Dr. Alan Prescott, a respected American historian known for uncovering hidden structures beneath historical sites. He arrived not with ghost-hunting equipment, but with scientific tools, ground-penetrating radar, thermal scanners, and advanced imaging technology designed to see beneath solid stone. To the townspeople, however, his calm confidence felt unsettling, as if he underestimated what lay beneath the church. On his first night of scanning, something immediately disturbed the team. The radar showed hollow spaces directly beneath the chapel altar, areas that should never have existed in any traditional church design. These chambers formed a circular pattern, as though arranged deliberately rather than accidentally. Prescott grew visibly tense, ordering his team to halt all activity until morning. Locals who stood at a distance swore that while the machines hummed, the air around the church grew colder, and faint candlelight flickered briefly inside the ruined walls before vanishing again. The next day, drilling began through the chapel floor. As the concrete gave way, a strange smell rose up, a mixture of burnt wax, iron, and something old and buried. Workers grew uneasy when their equipment malfunctioned repeatedly, as if the ground itself resisted being opened. When the first hidden chamber was finally exposed, silence fell over the entire site. Below them lay a sealed underground vault carved from blackened stone, untouched for more than a century. Carefully lowering cameras into the darkness, the team discovered 6 small iron coffins arranged in a perfect circle around a central empty space. Each coffin was identical, cold, rusted, and engraved with faint religious symbols that had been partially scratched out. When technicians opened the first lid, gasps echoed through the chapel. Inside was not a body, but a nun's rosary, crucifix, and name tag, Margaret, resting atop a solid mass of blackened candle wax that had hardened like stone over decades. As the remaining coffins were opened one by one, the pattern repeated: Ruth, Eleanor, Agnes, Clara, and Beatrice, all represented, yet none physically present. No bones, no remains, no fabric, only wax, personal religious items, and a chilling sense that these women had not been buried, but erased. Prescott stared at the 7th empty space in the center, realizing it was positioned directly beneath the altar where prayers had once been spoken, unaware of what lay hidden below. The deeper the excavation went, the more the atmosphere around St. Helena's felt charged, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Workers reported strange equipment glitches, cameras shutting off, batteries draining within minutes, and audio recorders capturing static that resembled distant voices. Dr. Prescott ordered the site sealed at dusk each day, but even then, floodlights flickered unpredictably across the ruined chapel, casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to move without anything creating them. Locals standing beyond the barricades insisted they could hear faint chanting drifting from beneath the church, though no one was underground at the time. When the central chamber was fully uncovered, the team discovered something far more disturbing than the 6 iron coffins. Embedded beneath the empty 7th space was a small, buried bell, much older than the convent itself. Unlike the great church bell that once hung in the tower, this one was dark, corroded, and etched with spiraling symbols that matched the carvings found in the forbidden basement. Its surface felt unnaturally cold to the touch, even in the heat of summer, and several workers claimed it pulsed faintly like a heartbeat when they approached it. As cranes carefully lifted the buried bell from the earth, it began to tremble on its own. No wind, no machinery vibration, no human contact. Then, without anyone striking it, the bell emitted a low, resonant tone, soft at first, then slowly growing louder. The sound was not metallic, it was almost vocal, carrying an echo that seemed to travel not through air, but through bone. Several crew members dropped to their knees, overwhelmed by dizziness, while others felt an inexplicable wave of sorrow wash over them. In that same moment, every person present later reported hearing 6 distinct female voices whispering in perfect unison. The words were calm, controlled, and chillingly clear. We were never taken, we were chosen. Some swore they felt invisible hands brush past them. Others claimed they saw brief flashes of 6 shadowy figures standing in a circle around the open chamber before vanishing when a sudden gust of cold air swept through the ruins. Prescott himself froze, unable to speak, his face drained of all color. That night, despite police barricades and round-the-clock security, St. Helena's convent changed again. The air grew thick, the sky turned an unnatural shade of deep red at sunset, and the buried bell continued to hum faintly beneath protective tarps. From miles away, residents of Blackwood claimed they heard distant tolling drifting across the valley, slow, deliberate, and unmistakably real, echoing through empty streets, rattling windows, and settling over the abandoned church like a living presence that refused to remain buried. That morning, St. Helena's convent was officially declared uninvestigatable. The site was sealed, cameras were removed, and Dr. Prescott disappeared from public view, refusing to speak again about what he had witnessed beneath the altar. Blackwood returned to an uneasy silence, but it was no longer the same silence as before. It was heavier, watchful, and filled with something waiting just beyond perception. Locals say that on certain nights, when the fog rolls down the hill and the moon hangs low, the broken bell tower still trembles. Some swear they see 6 faint lights moving through the ruined chapel, as if prayers are still being whispered in a place that was never meant to be abandoned. And though historians may argue, scientists may speculate, and skeptics may laugh, the people of Blackwood know the truth in their bones. The 6 nuns were never lost to history, they were bound to something far older than the church itself. So if you ever find yourself passing through Vermont at midnight and hear a distant bell tolling from an empty hill, remember this story. Because sometimes, the past does not stay buried, it waits.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.